Hello and welcome to A Gypsy's Kiss, the vlog. I'm Shelley Carney.
And I'm Toby Eunice. Stick with us a couple of seconds and we'll answer a bunch of the questions you asked us.
All right, so we have a lot of our subscribers who gave us some really great questions this week. But first, let's take care of some housekeeping. We want to thank everybody who gave us a question this week and subscribed. We had a really nice turnout, didn't we?
Increase in subscribers and over 10 pages worth of questions, and I'll address that in just a minute.
Okay. Also, Toby would like to thank those people who've been commenting that some people have been taking our videos and uploading them to their own channels, and they've been letting us know about that so that we can take care of that copyright infringement.
Yeah, there's apparently pirates have found our content interesting enough to literally download the videos and upload them to their own YouTube channels. So I wanted to especially thank Frank Rizzo and ES, who I think is Eric Schmidt, for letting us know that some of our content had been pirated and put on another YouTube channel. We've made it a point to inform YouTube each time that happens, and they seem to take care of it for us. So we're very thankful that our subscribers and viewers are letting us know that happens. And if you see one of our videos on another channel that isn't a Gypsy's Kiss, let us know and we'll have YouTube take care of it. But again, thanks.
Now, it's perfectly fine if you want to add it to a playlist, as long as it stays embedded on our channel. It's when people take it and download it off the internet and then upload it to their own channel, that's when it becomes a problem.
And also, we've always been open to the idea of people using our materials in their videos, in the searchers, in Thomas Leach's movie. He used some of our material, so we don't have a problem with you maybe borrowing a scene or two from them. And if you let us know, you know, that's nice. And if you give us credit for us, that's even nicer. But just the outright stealing of YouTube content, that's just not cool.
Right, or any intellectual property. I know sometimes we have issues with people saying that they've come up with something that they've seen in one of our videos.
Yeah, exactly.
So just keep an eye out for us, and we appreciate that. Okay, and again, we got 10 pages worth of questions.
We did. We got far more than we expected. So we're not going to produce a 1.5-hour video no. To answer all of them. We're going to answer them 20 minutes at a time, but we are going to answer the questions that were asked with a couple of caveats. Number one, the first caveat is that if the answer to your question is already in one of our previously produced videos, I'm just going to answer your question by pointing you to that video, because there were several of those questions that really could be answering by watching our previous videos.
And if you watch that video and you still have a question, please just go ahead and put that question on that video comments.
Because we get to it. Mm-hmm. And the other thing too is we got back at 4 o'clock this morning, so I haven't had time to go back and answer all the comments that arrived on our various videos while we were gone to see the solar eclipse in Nebraska. We got some great photos, and we're going to post some of those photos to our Gypsy's Kiss blog so that you can share in that experience as well.
And again, the answers to your questions are based on our research and our boots on the ground recons and the things that we've discovered. So just take that with a grain of salt. When we answer your question, those are our opinions.
That's right. There are opinions. We all have opinions. There's no guarantees here. Nobody's found the treasure, including us. And so what we do, like you, is express our opinions. You can take them or leave them or use them that you can. But as Shelley said, they are based on our research and boots on the ground experience.
Okay.
Ready?
Let's get started. So from Nina A. and Cindy Guess, what are your top picks for places to search in New Mexico and why? Now, we have covered some of this in a couple of our New Mexico videos.
We have, and I think we did one just recently. Mm-hmm. So our top picks are all in the stretch of mountains that literally are north of Santa Fe. We do not expect that there's anything located, what I would say, west of the east bank of the Rio Grande River. Although the Tusas Mountains are there, we don't believe that's where Forrest was talking about when he said it was in the Rocky Mountains. The top picks for that area are associated with our perception of the definition of warm waters, which we get from the New Mexico Game and Fish Department fishing regulations. And our top picks, not in any kind of order, are Red River and the Cimarron River, or the Red River Canyon and the Cimarron River Canyon.
And our next recon will be to Cimarron. So that's our top pick. And it's because it fits the clues most closely. Not only the Where Warm Waters Halt and the canyon down,
Home of
but
Brown.
Home of Brown.
Yeah.
You can imagine a blaze if you look at the map of the forest and the trees. It kind of looks like a bear with a blaze on its nose. So there's some things that are drawing us to Cimarron.
To Cimarron, yeah. I would say that would be our top pick.
UFO Hunter 00. Recently, NASA has been snooping around Yellowstone National Park with their high-tech airplanes with X-ray vision and thermal vision. Do you think they are looking for the treasure? No.
Good answer. Yeah. We prefer the open-ended questions. No, we do not. First of all, NASA is a publicly funded entity. They are nasa.gov. You actually pay for NASA to operate, and it's a wonderful institution that has done much for America ever since it was established in 1956. And they do great research, and a lot of that research ends up in the things that we do, from Teflon to how you brush your teeth, honestly. But the reason they're up there is they are in with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I'm sorry. The Bureau of Land Management, the U.S. Department, I guess it is Agriculture, which has the United States Forest Service, the United States Park Service. They are studying the volcanic caldera that sits below Yellowstone. The mound is growing, and they're very concerned. It's overdue for its 160,000-year explosion, and so they're doing research on that, and that's why they're flying planes over the area. They're basically collecting data on a regular basis about the supervolcano that resides below Yellowstone. So no need to imagine you're competing with NASA. And honestly, if you were competing with NASA, we would have lost this game already.
And it's not worth their time, really, for that amount of money.
No.
They have a lot more money at stake in the things that they're already doing.
Exactly. So,
D. Pete 82. What are your thoughts on Forrest's question? What if there is no legal question? With regard to the legalities of the location of where the chest is found. In your past video, you mentioned you just would never reveal the location, but what if the finder was forced to prove where they found it? That's quite the question there. A lot of content there. What if there is no legal question, and he's referring to the legalities of the location where the chest is found? And Forrest told us, Terry Scant with Marvel Gaze, just take the chest and go in peace.
I think our opinion is there will only be legal questions if you enable the legal questions to arise. Our opinion is that Forrest has placed the treasure in a location that is effectively, and he's referred to this more than once, quote, public lands, unquote. And because they are public lands, there are certain restrictions, but none of the restrictions on those public lands would prevent you from owning the treasure. You might have to make them aware that you hid it. But I think the reference to the Terry Scant with Marvel Gaze is an indication that he wants you to pick up the treasure and walk away with it. And yes, we have made a conscious decision. Oh, one other point regarding the legalities of it. If you look at the video, our video in which we talk about the sandwich, how the poem is constructed by a sandwich, our conclusion is that the first, fifth, and sixth stanzas of the poem, while not containing clues, are basically a legal document that establish his sanity, his ownership, and then grant title or transfer ownership to the person who finds the treasure. And so I think, and Forrest has said on numerous occasions, that he thought this all out. He engaged lawyers to make sure that it was correct. And we believe the only problems that could arise would be the result of the treasure hunter announcing their find and announcing the location, which is why we've decided, A, not to announce that we are the finders, although we will announce the find, but we will never, ever reveal the location of the find. We don't think that's in our best interest, and we think it has the potential to create some legal problems, if nothing else, by people who think they own it. And you cannot be forced to reveal the location. Our plan is to tell folks that we found the treasure where Forrest hid it, and we have been assured on more than one occasion, not personally, but by Forrest, that he will follow the lead of the finders, and if they don't want to reveal the location of the treasure, he will not reveal the location of where he hid it. So we don't think you can be forced. There is no law that will force you to reveal the location of the treasure. And I think I've said in the past, if it comes to that, then I found it on my property in Pecos, New Mexico.
And the more anonymous you can keep everything, the safer you're keeping yourself.
That's right.
Adam Foddy.
Hey, Adam, one of our regulars from the UK.
Yeah. And thanks so much again for continuing to post frequently and watch our videos. Adam Foddy wants to know, how would you both go about spending the millions of dollars you would receive from the sale of the treasure? Would you invest it or blow it all on fast cars? Well, I've given this some thought, and thank you for the question. I really enjoy thinking about it. I think the first thing I would do is do some remodeling on my house, and my husband and I are thinking of retiring in sometime in the next 6 to 10 years, and we would like to have another house somewhere else, possibly Colorado, something with solar and wind power. So it would be nice to start putting that together for when we retire. We could move there. So that's another thing I'd like to spend the money on. And the third thing I'd like to spend the money on is helping others, specifically victims of domestic abuse. I would work within an organization. It's already doing that work, and I would like to help them create an app that would help children and people, adults who are in a domestic abusive environment, to identify themselves and to find help to get out. That's what I would do.
I would buy a really fast red Ferrari, drive to Las Vegas, and party until I ran out of money. No, I'm just kidding. So I'm retired, as many of you know, and my retirement is pretty much taken care of. But I would take the money and I would invest in a very nice RV and start traveling. Most of my career involved a lot of traveling, and I still love traveling. And I would use the RV to travel in the United States or maybe North America. And South America, but I would also like to do some traveling overseas. I miss some of those locations. So, and then whatever remained, I would just add to my will and leave it to my children. So I don't have any big plans to. It's not going to be.
What about that poker tournament you wanted?
Oh, I do want to spend $10,000 entering the World Series of Poker tournament in Las Vegas just once, even if I get knocked down in the first round. That's on my bucket list. It's one of the few items remaining on my bucket list. So.
Yeah, see, that's fun.
So, although I got to admit, yours is a far more noble objective than mine. Jimmy Fast.
Jimmy Fast, did you ever consider that maybe there is no treasure? Is it possible that we are all on one big snipe hunt? Well, Jimmy, I suppose that's a good question. We do hear it from a lot of people. We do not really consider that there's no treasure. Forrest does tell a lot of stories, but they all have that kernel of truth to them. And this treasure has been seen and corroborated by witnesses. There's no reason he couldn't have put it together. He had the money, he had the time, he had the will, and it is something he wanted to do. So I don't question any of that. So I don't believe we're on a snipe hunt.
Well, the point about snipe hunt is, although they're difficult to find and difficult to shoot, there are snipe. So you can find them if you look hard enough. In my experience in meeting and knowing Forrest, the conclusion that I've come to is that he's concerned about two things. One is his honor, because I think he's suffered from criticism that he sees as criticism of his honor and veracity. And the other thing he's concerned about is his legacy. And I think if you tie those two things together, honor and legacy, the last thing that a man, even if it wasn't Forrest, who was concerned about those two things would do, would be not to hide a treasure and then tell everybody he had hidden a treasure. We believe that Forrest hid a treasure, and we believe it because, as Shelley said, The pieces fit. It makes sense. He had the ability to do it. I think he wanted to do it. But more than anything, what Forrest wants is an honorable legacy that if it lasts 100 years or 1,000 years, whatever, then that's what he wants out of it. And if it were to be found that there were no treasure, neither of those things would be true. And I think that he sees that and feels that. So, no, we think the treasure is out there, and we're not on a snipe hunt. And if we did, we wouldn't invest as much time and effort as we do into looking for it.
That's right. How do you say that?
Ramesses.
Ramesses one. Fenn has said that the words in the poem appear as simple words, but goes on to relate how he spent years drawing the poem. Toby, I think somewhere you said you had tried some decoding, but it hadn't led anywhere. Could you divulge what you tried? Well, that's specifically to you, so I'm going to let you take that one.
So I did right at the beginning because I come from that field, cryptoanalysis. Spent, as I've said before, 5 years with the ASA, 5 years with the NSA, and that was my first reaction. My first reaction was that it was embedded in there, and so I started with looking for keywords. I think I identified 3 keywords that I thought had potential. One was treasure, one was brown, and Shelley believed that one of them was wise.
Halt.
Halt. Mm-hmm. And I tried decoding it by using the traditional methods of identifying a key, giving the key a numerological coefficient is what it's called, and then using that to break down the poem. Nothing came together. It just wasn't. There was nothing that I thought was reasonable. I think one of the ones that has potential that I've started but not finished is what they call the sliding word, and that is you take a word like treasure, locate the letters along the stanzas of the poem, and what's neat about treasure is, if I remember correctly, it's the longest word in the poem. Treasures. I'm sorry, it's the longest word in the poem, but it only uses 6 letters. Well, 6 letters, 6 stanzas. You know, I'm a big fan of Fenn's 3-6-9 strategy. So there's 6 letters, 6 stanzas. I'm wondering if you couldn't take those letters and key them so that you're
9 letters.
Well, that's for the treasures. You're right.
Wait.
And that's what it's the longest word in the poem.
Okay.
It has 9 letters.
Yes.
But there's only it has
6 unique letters.
6 unique letters,
Okay.
right? Thank you. I could have probably said that and not wasted 5 minutes. And I think those 6 unique letters could be tied to letters in each of the stanzas. So, for example, the T found in the first stanza, the first sentence of the first stanza, the R found in the first sentence of the second stanza, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of how we see it. That it does have some potential, but I have not spent a lot of time with it.
Now, also, if you take a look at our timeline video and our When and Where Warm Waters Halt, we discussed what Forrest was into during the quiet years, mostly the 90s and the early 2000s. And it was not code, it was archaeology and anthropology.
Right, yeah. Yeah, he doesn't strike me as a code writer.
Mm-hmm. Fossilman 123. I hear people say that Forrest Fenn is doing this to sell books. Can you break down the costs involved in making these books and how much he may make off these books? I'm going to refer you to the Moby Dickens video that Forrest Fenn appears in. He talks about this issue. He gave the Thrill of the Chase, the book, he gave that to the Collected Works bookstore. He did not keep the copyright. He doesn't make any money on that book.
That's right. That's true of the most recent books, The Thrill of the Chase and Too Far to Walk. He pays for the cost of production. He transfers that cost in one case to the Collected Works bookstore, and in the second case, that of Too Far to Walk, he transfers it to an LLC that is owned by his grandchildren. And then they reimburse him for the cost of production and nothing else. The profits they retain for themselves. In one case, those profits are retained by the Collected Works bookstore, and in the case of Too Far to Walk, they are retained by a LLC that belongs to his grandchildren. So he's not making any profits from the book. There is a small percentage of the, and 10 to 15% of the profits in The Thrill of the Chase that go to a cancer fund that he established, that he uses on occasion to help people who can't afford their cancer treatments. So he gets none of the profits from the book, from those books. He does profit from his other books, but not these two, not The Thrill of the Chase and not Too Far to Walk.
Right.
How are we doing, Kevin? Kevin is Shelley's husband. Kevin is behind the camera today. Say hi, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Thank you.
Time's up.
Time's up? Okay. So
Fibonacci says, in The Thrill of the Chase, Forrest implies that it was raining for 3 days in a row, with the third day being the day that J.D. Salinger died. Salinger died in January, and the only precipitation in January of that year was a small amount of snow. How significant do you think the 3 days of rain are? I am not familiar with the weather in New Mexico. Can you provide some enlightenment? Thank you. Probably not going to get rain in Santa Fe in January, so I'll tell you that right off the bat. But what we did discover, and we talked about in our video where we answered questions about our Lander recon, we discovered in Lander that many of Forrest's stories start with a kernel of truth, but then he adds in extra details that might come from other times or other places that he's been. So you end up with a compilation for your story. And I believe that's what's happened in this case as well.
I'm going to tell you the assumption that Shelley and I make. The assumptions. Assumption number one is that the poem represents everything that you need to know about in order to find the treasure. Assumption number two is everything else you hear from Forrest is a compilation of memories. They may or may not have been part of a single story. And this is a prime example. As Shelley said, it is more likely that the 3 days of rain occurred in August, that the memory of finding the J.D. Salinger book or in the Borders bookstore could have occurred in October, and there was snow on the ground in January, and he has memories of those three events. And he puts them together in a single story. And that's an assumption we make about everything that Forrest says after he wrote the poem, or over and above in him having written the poem.
Another thing I can tell you that is, if you focus on little details, you're going to end up going down a rabbit hole. You want to really focus on the poem, the words in the poem. Anything else could very well be a shiny object.
Yeah, he's very good at the distraction. If you look at all the materials that he's published after he published The Thrill of the Chase, we think of them as Shelley said, shiny objects designed to distract you and create entrances to rabbit holes that could keep you busy for months. Mm-hmm. And we don't think it's evilly intentional. We think he's just mischievous. He's a mischievous old guy, and I think he has fun with it. And I think part of telling stories like this is part of that mischievousness.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Or just throwing in extra details for interest and whether they were completely true or not. ZP. When the treasure is finally found, do you think every one of us will look at the location and the clues and think, why didn't I think of that? Or do you think people will be more like, meh, I don't know about those clues? I have a suspicion that Forrest Fenn thought the clues would be much easier to solve than it's turning out to be. Well, I think I agree with that. Forrest Fenn does seem to indicate that if you just keep it simple and don't overthink it, you should be able to go figure out those clues and find the treasure. But, we're all living in our own heads, and we have our own thoughts, and we think everybody should know what we're thinking and how we're feeling and what we mean when we say things. But that's wherein the challenge lies of good communication. Sometimes we just don't communicate well enough what we're thinking, or the other person doesn't get it because they haven't lived your life.
I think when Forrest says, show the poem to a child, I think that's what he means. I think it's relatively simplistic in terms of how it's presented. Now, I have shown the poem to children, and they look at me like I'm nuts, honestly. It doesn't fit, but I think that's what he means. I think there's a certain simplicity in the poem that we as searchers have a tendency to not just complicate, but to overcomplicate. And you can go to any one of the forums and see the discussions related to the various components of the poem, and you can see how rapidly it goes from where warm waters halt to the complexities of analyzing temperatures, of the difference between cool, warm, hot, etc. So I think it's a lot simpler than we give him credit for. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to refer you, I don't do this often, but I'm going to refer you to a YouTube channel, Cal Lazars. He pronounces it Cal Lazars. Nice guy, does a pretty good job of his blogs. But he was recently involved in another search called
Breakfast, Tea, and Bourbon.
Breakfast, Tea, and Bourbon. It was in a book written by, I'll never remember the author's name, but in the last video, they actually interviewed the 4 people who solved the clues and found the treasure. And I think what everybody was surprised at was how simple the solution ultimately was, that this family of 4 did a very good job of not overthinking it until they got right to the end, did the overthink, missed it the first time, and then went back and found in the same location and found it the second time. And I think he was even surprised. I think Cal Lazars was even a little bit surprised at how simple the solution was. And he talks about it several times as they're interviewing this family. I think that's the meh in all of this. The meh is going to be, wow, that was a lot more simple than I imagined it to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
Chad Bird 3. Warm waters halt is the start. What do you think warm waters really is? And we have discussed this in our couple of videos, especially when and where warm waters halt, and in our most recent video about the Rocky Mountains. So
we also talked about it in the treasure is hidden in New Mexico, full stop.
We did.
So,
we did.
But Chad, I'm going to answer this for you because you went through all the trouble of asking the question. We are of the opinion that the phrase warm waters is uniquely identified in the New Mexico state fishing regulations. Now, I've been tracking those regulations. They were issued every year. I've been tracking them since 2012. And honestly, it must be part of the law because the definition of warm waters doesn't change from year to year to year. You can go to page 24 of this year's fishing regulations. You'll see the definition of warm waters. And then on pages 25, 26, I think they are, you'll see exactly where warm waters halt. Where warm waters halt is at the beginning of special trout waters. And that's a geographically exact point. And I think that's important to locating where warm waters halt. So our opinion is that warm waters, the phrase warm waters is unique to New Mexico. We haven't found it in other fishing regulations, in other states' fishing regulations, although we've seen other states refer to warm water species and warm water, locations, but there is only one state that refers to the plural, warm waters, and uses it in their fishing regulations. So that's where we started it. That's where we're ending up again after several years now.
Okay. Anything else? All right. That's the end of the questions for today. Next week, we will give you more answers to your pressing questions because we don't want this video to get too long and lengthy.
Well, yeah, we were planning for 20 minutes, and now we know we're over 20 minutes. So, and that was just the first 10 questions. And as I said earlier, we got over 10 pages worth of questions, some of which we can answer just by leading people to other videos that we produce, but we're going to try and get to them all. We think that's fair since you went to the trouble of asking the question. We'll try and get answers to them. Mm-hmm. So the other thing that I want to point out is that this, along with this video, we're going to post a second video where Shelley's going to be asking our subscribers. What?
Where you are.
I did it?
Yeah. And Toby's going to be asking our subscribers for ideas for topics for upcoming shows.
I thought you did that.
No, you did that.
Oh, well, that was before the solar eclipse, and my brain has been fried since then. Okay,
you to wear
so
those
I will be
glasses.
asking you to give us some ideas for upcoming shows. We're going to ask you to put them in the comments box like this, and we're going to take some of those ideas and run with them. Not that we're running out of ideas, but we'd like to hear what our subscribers think would be interesting topics. Okay?
All right.
So,
look for that video and make sure you subscribe. Thank you so much for watching today and for all of your questions that made this video possible. Thank you for watching a Gypsy's Kiss, the vlog. I'm Shelley Carney.
and I'm Toby Eunice. Thanks for watching us this week. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye-bye.